So once again, I've caught a human malware, which means I am way too drained for some of the big projects I have planned around here. But I am just delirious enough to feel that this door is severely lacking in RGB and a handle. Today we're continuing the mission of turning this space into the Cyberpunk Starship YouTube studio of my dreams by turning this workshop door from a bore to Cyberpunk core. Is Cyberpunk core really a thing? Probably not. I'm sick. Give me some leeway here. Let's get to this. Step one in this project is pulling this heinous wooden stained trim off of this door frame. I need to get to the underlying structure, the door jamb, the door itself, and the surrounding wood framing so that I can accurately measure all of this out and get a proper design to the actual mounting structure and the actual shape of the casement of the door. Then I need to get this stupid deadbolt out of here. There's no door handle on this door. There is only this electronic deadbolt that I accidentally bump from time to time, locking the door between my office and my warehouse. I don't really understand why somebody put a deadbolt on here, but here it is, and it's going away. Then it's time to get the whole door pulled off of here because I don't really want anything white in the space. I want to get a coat of paint on this to match the rest of the studio aesthetic. With our prep steps done, I'm not going to make you watch paint dry. What you want to see is the design we're actually going to be creating. So let's take a look. Thankfully for me, I've got a wonderful in-house design department, aka my partner Ruby. She sketched up an excellent cyberpunky, angular, really on-theme design to fit what we want to make with this project. Often having the starting point to work from is the hardest thing. When I open a new Fusion project and I start to design out in CAD, having a blank slate is definitely the biggest hurdle to get over. With the dimensions that I measured off the door frame and door, I was able to create a rough structure, the framing around it, the door jamb and the door itself. So I was modeling to the actual real world dimensions I'm going to be working with. And with Ruby's reference image, I was able to scale that to real world dimensions and then create what I think is a pretty solid design. The design consists of a total of 24 individual pieces that we're going to need to print for this, not counting the accent pieces and door handle and a few other odds and ends. So I'm really not sure where I thought this was a small project to be biting off. That realization that I've definitely bitten off more than I should have is where I am thrilled to have studio sponsor and sponsor of this video in particular on my side, Prusa Research. My Prusa Core 1 print farm and the XL are going to be powering through prints on this project. The material I chose to go with here is Urban Gray Prusament PETG. For basically what is set decor like this, it's going to work out really well for a nice long-term, strong material that shouldn't deform and sag over time. And it's also the same material I used for my conduits on the wall, so it'll tie the color and the material aesthetic from one end of the studio to the other. And big projects like this require a fair bit of filament, so I'm glad to have Prusa as a supporter of the channel. And of course I need to thank studio sponsor PCBWay for making this space and these videos possible. More on their contribution to this project later. For now, we've got a pile of printed parts. Let's get to building a door frame. And I said this was going to be a small project. I truly am my own worst enemy, aren't I, Noodle? Little helper. Let's get to work, kiddo. Threaded brass heat inserts are pressed into the plastic ends so that our individual sections can be bolted together. To start with, I'm going to mock everything up, make sure I have all the pieces, I didn't double print anything, and they're all lining up as expected. Once I know that's good, I can move forward and actually start to bolt things together. That's going to use M3 screws and washers just to reinforce things a little bit. Some pieces have 2 screws, some have 3, just kind of whatever the design allowed for spacing wise. I am using a thread locker on the screws to ensure they don't loosen up over time and cause some squeaks and rattles when the door closes and opens or something like that. And just like that, we've got the backside of a door frame. You're seeing the inner structure right now, so it doesn't look the greatest. The design is flawed in plenty of ways. We'll talk about that later. For right now, before we get this thing installed on the wall, it's time to get the RGB LEDs installed while we have easy access to routing them through here. On the inside perimeter of the door frame are a handful of openings that are going to be the lighting sections. I don't want the whole thing lit, I just want portions of it. For this, I'm using these SK6812 RGB LEDs, the same ones I used in the Voron PC case. They're not the brightest things, but I think they'll work out fine for the accent lighting I want here. The frame of this door housing has an angled section for these strips to mount onto that shines at the backside of those openings without having the LEDs directly visible from the front. If you've ever soldered wires to the little copper pads on these types of RGB strips, you'll know it's not fun on a good day. I screwed up a little bit on this design in that I didn't make the cable pass-through points in a lot of my pieces big enough to feed strips through. So I had to hand wire all of this in situation on the door frame, which made it extra fiddly. And making it even worse is this whole project's just too big for any of the workbenches I currently have, so I had to do this all kneeling down on the concrete floor, and I'm really feeling my age in my lower back right now. Embarrassing number of hours later, I've got this all wired up. I need to test it right here, right now on the floor, because once it's installed on the wall, I'm not going to be able to get to a lot of these solder joints if I need to touch something up or make some changes. So in comes y'all. Yet another WLED controller, the little open source PCB that runs the WLED open source RGB control firmware that has been powering the RGB in Mandic Labs 2.0 for basically every project. Studio sponsor PCBWay put these together for me for all of these projects, and they can get them for you too. There's a link in the description to this particular project and to PCBWay in general for your PCB, CNC machining, and 3D printing services. They can really take your projects to the next level. I got this board flashed. I've got it temporarily wired in here with the 5-volt 60-watt power supply I'm going to be using here. Did the math, and this should be plenty of PSU for this application. Let there be light. I think this might be the first RGB project in Mandic Labs 2.0 that has just worked with the first configuration I put together. I counted all the LED driver chips so I could update that. I knew what driver chips I'm using. So I have experience with this at this point and was able to get the configuration together, and it just works. Which means we've got to get this mounted up on the wall so we can get the final details on it and get this project wrapped up. There is a piece of the puzzle missing here though, a pretty big one. The door itself, it's still back there on the sawhorses. There's also a design element with that I haven't shown you yet. That is, if you've looked at the door frame, you might have noticed already, it has chamfered upper corners on it. Rectangular doors just don't scream sci-fi or cyberpunk, they just scream home and Lowe's to me. So I printed up some quick little guides that allowed me to mark the corners of the door in the right location for the 45-degree angles that I needed to match the door trim that we're going to be installing, and I lopped those off before I painted the door. Now we can get it reinstalled in here. The door jamb doesn't really mate to it. That's a future project. For now, we're just worried about getting this from the outside here in the studio to look right for filming. The door in place, it's time to get this installed. I have to carefully lift this as it's not meant to be a structural standing thing on its own. It's meant to mount to the wall, so care is necessary in transit from assembly to where it's getting installed. Temporarily positioning this thing, I know that I need it just up a little bit off the floor. That's the way I designed it. The PDG won't rot against the concrete, but I wanted to be able to shim it into position. With the second side shimmed, this is now standing free. It's not leaning against the wall. I'm kind of shocked by that because of the, as I said, the floppiness of it. I had to be careful moving it. I should have staggered the screw pattern for the mounting between sections, but that's adding rigidity that I don't need. Once this gets screwed to the wall, it's not going to matter. But anyway, I never would have expected it to freestand. here it is. Now to screw it to the wall. With that, I've got one screw in the middle, and that's all that's holding this up here, so I can pivot on that. This side is a little high, and I'm kind of seeing that. The gaps to my door jamb are a little off. On this side, it's a little bit bigger, so it seems like the whole thing wants to pivot, so I gotta take a shim out over here. All right, a little bit of shimming back and forth, and I'm splitting hairs at this point. I didn't actually check how square the door jamb is, the door itself, any of that, which I should have. So I could be chasing my tail on this for quite some time. I think it's time to roll forward with what I've got and sink more screws. To mount the sides, which I've been calling the pillars, the right and left pillar, through the openings for the LED diffusers, which are coming soon, I have holes in a flange here. Those are lined up with the stud framing of the wall around the door jamb. One of the reasons I am really happy that I took the time to model out the 2x4s around the door jamb, so I knew where these should fall. I do have to angle to get the screws into them, but I figured that into the placement of the holes to go into the studs. And with the final screw in, this thing is mounted. It's time to cap it off with the details and the LED diffusers, which I think is the next thing we should get to. Diffusion in this particular instance is pretty straightforward. The openings where the LEDs are pretty small, so it's a lot easier than the whole power conduits on the wall was. I just cut some clear acrylic on our CO2 laser to match the openings that I have to work with. Now it's clear, so it's not going to diffuse very well. That's where my power sander comes in. I'm going to use the orbital sander and sand the inner face to try and get a uniform just roughness on it. This is where, sanding marks are going to work for me to create my diffusion, but I'm not going to touch the outside of the acrylic, hopefully, so that it has a smooth, clean finish. I can wipe it down and you won't have that roughness visible on the outside and inconsistency that might be there. Then I can wipe down my material with some glass cleaner to get off the dust and debris, leaving us with a smooth, shiny side of our acrylic and a rough, sanded side. It's not really that rough, but it does diffuse the light, which is exactly what I was aiming for. I think this is going to work out pretty well. Sure, the consistency is not the same as some commercial products I might purchase, but for this application, I'm fine with it. Installation is going to be as simple as a dab of CA glue at the edges, press it in place, and use a little activator to get it to set quickly. Yes, this makes the diffusers permanent, but I didn't design this to be a particularly serviceable thing. It's meant to be set dressing in the studio. This should be fine. The only other problem that can occur is CA glue can fog acrylic, as you can see on this keypad that I haven't really talked about to this point, but that only aids in diffusion, so I'm not worried about it. This keypad, though, is a great point to talk about the details that we're adding here. This was again cut and laser engraved on the CO2 laser to get the right design for this touchpad keypad, which is purely aesthetic. It has no purpose other than beep boop, pretend it does something. This gets a 3D printed bezel that goes over the face of it to cap off and finish off the look. Again, this is just held on with CA glue. But that leads us to making this thing no longer just one gray border of one color, adding splashes of different colors around the edges to finish this thing off. And with those final touches, the door frame is done. I am what would be best described as thrilled with the way this turned out. The overall aesthetic of it, it looks excellent. It really fits what I'm going for with the studio and turned a boring office door into something so much more. There is a detail that I've added, a couple of them actually, that you didn't see previously. The door itself was just a little too plain, so I added this emboss detail to it. This is a sound panel that I cut to match the shape and then printed the border that goes around it and holds it to the door. It adds some visual interest and has a functional sound damping effect. One surface in this whole space at least has something on it. It's pretty much the only thing in here right now, actually. Then there's the door handle itself. This just covers the doorknob hole. There is no catch anymore. I don't need it on this door. There's an auto closing function. And realistically, it's just me coming in and out of here. I don't need to be able to lock this door at any point, really. There is a final detail missing. One that is just adding a little levity to this door. I set to printing a sign on my Prusa XL. This is using 4 different colors to create the design that I'm going for. There are a couple of different layers to the colors, so it's not just like a one-layer color change situation. So there are a handful of tool changes in this print. Overall, it only produced a purge tower at approximately 1.5 grams. I sliced the same design to be printed on the Bamboo H2D with its dual nozzles and AMS, the same 4 colors used in that, all the same print parameters, and it was going to use a little over 4 grams of filament in the waste portion. Sure, 4 grams is not a lot, but start thinking about bigger prints with a lot more tool changes and a lot more colors, and you're going to run into where it starts to make a lot more sense with the Prusa XL and the tool changer. And the sign makes a whole bunch of sense for me. Throughout this video, you may have noticed some of the printed parts don't have the best print quality to them, and that's purely down to me. I rushed through both design and the printing of the parts because I need this project done to move on to the next one. As such, I didn't design for printability as much as I usually do, where I aim to make things that are going to succeed right off the bat. I used a lot more supports than I usually would. Some of the parts are a little thinner in sections, which cause some wobble and give, and I had to run prints faster than I usually would, aiming usually for a little more quality. This just had to get done. That said, it looks great from a distance, and you folks are only ever going to see it like this, not up close picking apart the details, so to me, this is just fine. I do feel like the final result is maybe a little more Futurama versus Blade Runner. I think that's mostly down to just how clean it is right now. Some weathering would go a long way, but I want to get a lot more of the studio space built out, and maybe we'll do like one big weathering project and grunge this space up, or let it happen naturally over time. This is one big workshop after all. For now, going in and out of this office door is so much nicer now. I forgot one more detail. This light switch here, in such close proximity to this, looks terrible. It's beige, for goodness sake. I got this flat white smart one with RGB from Sonoff. It's going on. That's better. I can't get it to stop RGB puking. I need to figure out how to set it to one color. Whatever. That's a lot better than the ugly switch. Thank you to Prusa Research, sponsor of this video and the studio in general, and my other studio sponsor, PCBWay, for keeping the RGB lights on. I heavily appreciate them. Check out their links in the description. Hope you found this video interesting. Drop it a like if you did. Let me know in the comments what I should have done differently in this project, and get subscribed to ensure your 3D prints don't fail. It's not a guarantee, but it can't hurt. See you folks in the next one. Phew.